The rain on Tariumphim didn't fall. It hissed. Acids in the upper atmosphere carved each drop into a sizzling bullet, evaporating before they hit the sand, leaving behind a steam that made breathing feel like swallowing soup. Dane Corvin crouched behind a derelict skiff, muttering insults at his boots. The weather, and whoever invented the phrase glorious duty. He adjusted the filter on his helmet and peeked out across the dune-scattered wasteland, eyes scanning for movement, traps, or unexpected explosions. The holy trinity of any given Tuesday in the Frontier Defense Corps. A flare had gone up 20 minutes ago, unregistered, flickering with a distress signal older than most of the tech in his pack. Protocol said ignore it. Protocol also said don't adopt street cats on urban missions, and he had 3 back home. Dane wasn't a man of protocol. He was a man of stubborn guts, low expectations, and caffeine dependencies. So he moved low and slow, rifle ready, cracking jokes in his head just to keep from cracking for real. The wreckage came into view as the wind shifted. A downed shuttle, small and jagged, half buried in the sand. Judging by the burn patterns and the sheer number of holes in its hull, someone had taken offense to its continued existence. Dine approached with practiced wariness, circled the perimeter, then paused. A faint sound came through the static in his helmet, something that wasn't the wind, breathing, high-pitched, fast. He crouched and turned on the light at the end of his rifle. "All right," he said, voice gruff but steady. "If you're a malfunctioning drone or a flesh-eating sand snake, make it quick. I skipped breakfast." Something moved, a shimmer of blue behind the torn edge of a metal panel. Dane's breath caught. Not a snake, not a drone. A girl, alien, small, filthy, crouched with wild eyes and trembling hands around a jagged chunk of metal like it was a sacred blade. Her skin was the color of dusk, a soft glowing blue, and her ears, long and arched, twitched in response to every sound, her golden eyes fixed on him with all the defiance of a soldier twice her size. Dane lowered the rifle. "Well," he said softly, "that's not what I expected." She hissed, a little tooth-bearing snarl that made him smile despite himself. "You got guts, kid. Bad survival instincts, but guts." She didn't answer, just clutched the shard tighter. Blood dripped from one palm. Her lips moved in a whisper he couldn't hear. "Easy," he said. "Not here to hurt you. Scout's honor." She blinked, her head tilted, ears twitching. Then in a voice barely audible over the wind, she said, "Liar." Dane laughed. He couldn't help it. "Fair, but this time I swear I'm telling the truth. You hurt?" She didn't respond. Instead, she stood up slowly, shakily, her knees threatening to give. She was thin, bones visible under her skin, clothes torn, shoes mismatched. She took a step and collapsed forward. Dane caught her instinctively. All right, he muttered. "You win. I'm now officially the universe's worst soldier. I'm about to commit a dozen violations of military code for a kid who thinks I'm a liar. Don't get used to it." She didn't respond. She'd passed out. Dane looked up at the smoky horizon, then down at the small form in his arms. "Yeah," he said. "This'll look great in my court-martial." He moved fast after that, weaving through the ruins and back to his outpost, using the terrain to avoid patrol drones. The outpost wasn't much, a glorified can opener with legs, but the medic was competent and owed Dane 2 favors, 1 bottle of whiskey and a kidney. They got her stabilized. No ID, no comm chip. Nothing but a thin strip of fabric wrapped around her wrist with markings no one could read. Dane stayed longer than he should have. Long enough to see her wake, flinch, then realize she was safe. She stared at him, wide, unblinking, and whispered something he didn't catch. "You got a name, Oshawara?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, poked his chest, and said with perfect clarity, "You smell like dirt and regret." He blinked, then laughed so hard he nearly fell off the chair. "All right, we'll call you Sass Bucket for now." Eventually, Interworld Refugee Services came and swept her away, their transport humming like a swarm of bureaucratic bees. She clutched the edge of the doorway and looked back at him. "I grow," she said. "I come back. You wait." "You bet," he said, waving. "Right after I retire and marry a senator." Then she was gone. Dane tried not to think about her after that. Tried hard. But there were days, quiet ones, when he remembered the way she'd stared at him. Fierce, like she'd memorized him. The war ended, or at least slowed. Peace treaties came and went. Dane got older, louder, crankier. Moved to a station near the edge of civilized space. Ran cargo. Avoided commitment. Became the weird neighbor who yelled at vending machines. Then 15 years later, a woman walked into a dive bar on Zeta Station 3. Tall, luminous, blue skin, golden hair, and ears like soft blades. She looked right at him, smiled like she'd been practicing for years, and said, "Hello, Dane. You look exactly like I expected." Old, he choked on his drink. She sat beside him like she belonged there, ordered something neon and fizzy, and turned to him with those same golden eyes. "I came back," she said. "Clearly," he croaked. "I'm here to fulfill my vow." He blinked. "You're what now?" She leaned in closer, her voice sweet as syrup and twice as dangerous. "I'm here to marry you." Dane closed his eyes. Okay, definitely drinking too much again. Or not enough. Dane Corvin was not a man easily rattled. He'd once dismantled a bomb while drunk and allergic to the detonator compound. He had stood toe-to-toe with a Vorlek berserker who smelled like scorched onions and had twice as many arms as manners. He had, on occasion, voluntarily eaten military cafeteria pudding, but none of that prepared him for the moment when a glowing blue woman sat across from him in a bar and casually announced she intended to marry him. He leaned back, cleared his throat, and then, with all the smoothness of a man who hadn't dated since wristwatches were fashionable, said, "Okay, just to clarify, you do know I'm human, right? Fully. No special abilities, no mystical destinies. I have bad knees. My back makes noises like an old hover bike. I once lost a fight to an auto toaster." Avon smiled like the sun had hired her for overtime. "I know. And," he continued, waving his drink for emphasis, "you were a child the last time I saw you. A very bitey child with an unsettling vocabulary and a stick you called a doomblade." "I've upgraded," she said, sipping her drink. "The doomblade is now plasma forged." Dane blinked. "Oh, great. That's really reassuring." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the buzz of music, clinking glasses, in a nearby argument about the ethics of genetically modified karaoke. Avon watched him with serene amusement. Dane mostly watched the exit. "Look," he said finally, "this vow thing, it's a cultural obligation, right? You made it because I helped you out of a bad spot. You're not really here to marry me. I mean, nobody does that. Real life's messier than ancient customs, right?" "I came," she said, setting down her drink with quiet gravity, "because I made a promise. Because I grew up watching war shape my people and learning peace from the memory of one man who gave me his coat and talked to me like I mattered. And because I wanted to see what kind of old grump you'd turn into." Dane sighed. "The worst kind. I yell at trash compactors." She smiled again. The station didn't make it easy to ignore her. News of her arrival spread faster than space flu. Within hours, Dane found himself being asked questions by neighbors who never remembered his name. "So," said a security officer named Vesh, leaning over the counter with a smirk, "you're engaged now, huh?" "I'm not engaged," Dane said. "She brought paperwork. She brought jokes. She brought diplomatic clearance." Dane groaned and dropped his head onto the table. "I once saved a cat from a burning shuttle. Is it going to propose next?" Vesh raised an eyebrow. "Only if it gets a promotion first." To make matters worse, Avon moved in 2 doors down from him in the residential quarter. She brought 3 crates of books, an automated tea brewer that sang opera, and a large lizard named Gnarl who only communicated in disapproving grunts. Dane tried to keep his distance. He really did. But every time he passed her door, it opened automatically, and Avon appeared with that maddening smile and some bizarre snack she insisted he must try or insult 12 generations of cuisine. "This tastes like moss and betrayal," he told her one afternoon, holding a purple cube that steamed at the edges. "It's traditional," she said. "So was bloodletting." "You're exaggerating. Only mildly poisonous." When they weren't arguing over food or whether his jacket could legally qualify as an endangered species, they started talking. Really talking. Avon asked questions about his time in the war, the people he lost, the ones who never came home. And she listened, not like most people did, politely nodding while their thoughts drifted elsewhere. She listened like every word was a secret, and she was trying to solve the man beneath them. In return, Dane asked about her childhood, how she'd navigated refugee systems, diplomatic schooling, and eventually her rise in status. She didn't boast, but the pride was there in her voice. She'd built herself from the ash of a fallen world, and she carried it with grace and enough sarcasm to make him grin when he didn't want to. One evening, she dragged him to a formal gathering on the upper level. "It's just a networking thing," she said, ignoring his loud groans and visible horror. "I own one suit," Dane argued, "and it's older than the ship's plumbing. I already replicated you a new one." "You what?" "You're wearing it." He looked down. "When did that happen?" The event was held in the Garden Dome, an artificial biome filled with imported plants, some of which tried to eat his shoes. Avon mingled like she belonged there. Dane lurked near the punch bowl, fending off questions about their arrangement. "So are you in love?" someone asked. "I'm in confusion," Dane replied. By the end of the night, after being introduced as the one who saved Avon during the Terrion Wars, at least 7 times, he slipped out to the observation deck for air. Avon followed. "You hate crowds," she said. "I hate being stared at like I'm a rare alien egg someone accidentally sat on." She leaned on the railing beside him. Below them, the station lights glittered like fallen stars. Her long ears flicked in the artificial breeze. "I know this wasn't what you wanted," she said softly, "but I didn't come here to trap you in tradition. I came because I wanted to know you again, the real you." Dane looked at her, really looked. She wasn't a girl anymore. She wasn't a soldier either. She was something in between, fierce, curious, a little chaotic. And for the first time, he didn't feel like she'd come to honor a vow. She'd come to choose. "I still yell at appliances," he said, "and my knee clicks when I sit down." "I've seen worse," she said. "Gnarl has opinions on your diet, by the way." They stood together in silence, the galaxy stretching out around them like a promise. Dine wasn't ready. He wasn't sure he ever would be. But he also wasn't running. "So," he said, "this wedding thing, hypothetically speaking, do I get a veto?" Avon grinned. "You get a sword." Dine blinked. "Oh, no." "Oh, yes." Dine was getting used to waking up confused. This time, the confusion began with a sharp alarm, an automated voice reciting evacuation protocols in 6 languages, and a squirrel-sized cleaning bot standing on his chest, attempting to vacuum his beard. He swatted the bot away and sat up groggily. "Avon," he muttered, stumbling out of bed, "tell me this isn't another cultural engagement test thing." The door slid open before he reached it. Avon stood there fully armored, holding what looked like a ceremonial battle standard and sipping a drink with far too many floating eyeballs in it. "You didn't read the memo?" she asked cheerfully. "Today's the trial of valid unions. Standard procedure for confirming matrimonial intent across interstellar species." Dane blinked. "That sounds made up." "It's been practiced for centuries," she said. "Which species?" "Mostly one that went extinct due to ceremonial fire dancing." "Right, of course." She tossed him a bundle. "Put that on." He unfolded it and discovered a shimmering outfit that looked like it had been designed by someone who had once seen a wedding on a pirate broadcast and misunderstood everything about clothing. "This has no knee," he said. "They must be unburdened for speed and spiritual honesty." Spiritual honesty smells like glue and shame. Nevertheless, an hour later, Dane found himself standing on the arena floor of the station's auxiliary cargo bay, which had been converted, with concerning enthusiasm, into an obstacle course involving fire rings, laser nets, and a suspicious number of robotic goats. Avon stood beside him, beaming with joy and mild menace. Around them, spectators from at least 7 systems had gathered. A holographic scoreboard loomed above. "Trial 1, the announcer blared. "The Gauntlet of Compatibility." Dane turned to Avon. "Please tell me this isn't a literal gauntlet." She handed him gloves with runic symbols and a cheerful skull motif. "It's fine. They only shock you if you lie." "I haven't had enough coffee for this." "You've never had enough coffee for anything." The trial began with them tied together at the wrists and forced to navigate a maze, while answering relationship questions yelled by floating drones. If they answered in sync, the path cleared. If not, something exploded. "What's her favorite color?" the drone demanded. "Blue," Dane shouted. "Black," Avon said at the same time. An explosion knocked them into a foam pit filled with hissing lizards. "Compromise," Dane grunted, hauling himself out. "Let's say dark navy." Trial 2 was a cooking challenge. Dane tried to replicate a traditional Valexian dish using ingredients that actively resisted being chopped. One of the vegetables bit him. "I think your broccoli just filed a complaint," he muttered. Avon, meanwhile, was assembling a perfectly symmetrical dish that glowed gently and levitated off the plate. "You're not even cooking," he said. "It's called molecular persuasion. It's called cheating. You're cute when you bleed slightly." By the time Trial 3 began, the dance of shared purpose, Dane was exhausted, slightly electrocuted, and definitely allergic to the alien sauce still coating his left arm. They stood in a circular arena filled with pulsing lights and strange gravity shifts, while a robot DJ dropped an aggressive beat. "Just follow my lead," Avon whispered. "I have 2 left feet. You have 1 functioning knee and a dream. Let's go." What followed was less a dance and more a war crime against rhythm. Dane stumbled through zero-G flips, narrowly avoided impalement by a rogue decorative ribbon, and at one point briefly phased into another dimension where a giant cat judged him silently. When the dance ended, applause erupted. Dane collapsed against Ivan. "I think I accidentally married that cat." Avon laughed, pulling him upright. "You're doing better than I expected." That's what they say right before someone explodes. The final trial, of course there was a final trial, involved reciting vows while under the influence of a mild truth serum mist. The officiator, a floating orb with a booming voice and a bow tie, hovered between them. "State your intentions clearly and honestly," it intoned. Avon stepped forward. Her eyes met his. "I intend to learn him like a star map, slowly, carefully, memorizing every odd flicker. I intend to be the reason he stops eating expired rations and arguing with vending machines." Dane looked at her, the mist swirling around them. "I intend," he said slowly, "to pretend I understand any of this. I intend to show up, even when I don't know how. And I intend to make her laugh, at least once a day, until one of us turns into a floating consciousness and the other one has to date a hologram." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the crowd erupted into cheers, whistles, and a few confused noises from species that didn't have mouths. Later that night, Diane and Ivan sat on the roof of the station's east wing, wrapped in a shared blanket, passing a bottle of something glowing and not entirely legal. "That was the weirdest day of my life," Dane said. "I know," she replied. "Wasn't it wonderful?" He looked at her profile, sharp ears catching the starlight, eyes like nebulae, smile shaped like trouble and comfort. Somehow, through trials, fire, and moderately sentient vegetables, he'd started to believe something utterly absurd. He could maybe, possibly, accidentally fall in love with her. But before he could say it, a voice buzzed through his comm. "Corvin, we've got incoming. Long-range sensors picking up a familiar signature. Looks like one of yours." He frowned. "One of mine?" "Yeah, from your old unit. And they're not sending flowers." Avon's gaze sharpened. "Trouble?" He sighed, dragging himself upright. "The nostalgic kind." She stood, already alert. "Then let's greet it together." He groaned. "I knew the honeymoon phase would end with guns." The familiar signature grew clearer as the small freighter neared the outer docking array of the station, its transponder code blinking like an old scar. Unit 9 TDAG. Dane stared at the readout on the console, trying to ignore the sinking feeling that settled in his stomach like a chunk of undercooked rations. He hadn't seen that unit tag since the end of the Karev War, and if it was broadcasting now, it either meant someone was making a very elaborate prank, or someone had brought his old life to the doorstep of his new and confusing one. Ivan leaned over his shoulder, chewing on a strand of synth grass she'd insisted was a Valexian calming herb, though it smelled like wet socks. "Do they usually call first, or just show up with explosives and unresolved trauma?" "Mostly the latter," Dane muttered. "That ship belonged to Commander Renatel. Friend, enemy or cryptic mentor figure with a tragic past? He hesitated. Yes. They met the docking crew at Bay C7, where the ship groaned into place with all the grace of a drunk hippo on a hoverboard. As the ramp lowered, Avon placed a hand on Dane's back, either reassuring him or checking for weapons. He appreciated the ambiguity. A single figure emerged from the shadowed hatch. Renatel hadn't changed much. Same steel jaw, same stiff posture, same haircut that looked like she'd asked a knife for a trim. Her armor was old-model Terran military, but polished to a mirror sheen, and her expression suggested she'd come not to visit but to audit. "Corvin," she said without preamble. "Commander." Dane nodded. "Nice of you to swing by without the artillery." "You're married," she said, as if delivering a field casualty report. "Almost. Culturally pending." Rena's eyes flicked to Avon. "You're the one from Velex Prime." Avon grinned. "That's me. Former child in distress, current chaos enthusiast." Rena didn't blink. "There's a situation." "There's always a situation," Dane said. "What flavor is it this time? Pirates? Political scandal? Galactic cupcakes gone rogue?" Rena handed him a datapad. "Rogue AI. Your old mission logs were flagged by Central. Seems someone or something is reconstructing the old Unit 9 operations. Someone's imitating your wartime patterns." Dane frowned as he scrolled through the files. "That can't be right. We wiped all that. It was classified, buried, locked in so many firewalls it made the encryption experts cry." "Yes," Rena said. "And yet here we are." Avon looked over his shoulder. "What are Operation Echo sites?" Dane exhaled slowly. "Old war installations. Places we hit hard and left harder. They weren't supposed to exist anymore." Rena crossed her arms. "They do now, and one of them just activated a dormant defense drone. It took out a recon ship yesterday." "Let me guess," Dane said. "You want me to go poke it? You're the only one who knows the internal architecture, and you're expendable." Dane blinked. "Oh, you kept the same leadership style." An hour later, they were crammed into a Scout-class cruiser named the Indignant Badger, Avon's idea naturally, headed for Echo Site Epsilon 6. Rena piloted like someone who trusted inertia more than safety, while Dane tried to remember the layout of a building he'd only ever seen once and partially exploded. Avon bounced in the seat beside him, poking at the tactical holomap. "I call the vent infiltration. I've been practicing my dramatic crawl." "No crawling," Dane said. "Last time you did that, we had to replace 3 ducks and a translator droid." "He insulted my anatomy. He was reciting a greeting." It was still rude. They landed on the ghosted rock with minimal ceremony. Echo Site Epsilon 6 looked like someone had thrown a bunker into a volcano, then decided it needed more attitude. Its outer shell was still intact, though scorched, and the main entrance blinked faintly with residual power. "Place smells like regret and badly aged secrets," Avon whispered as they stepped inside. Rena led the way, weapon raised, the beam from her tactical light slicing through the dark. Dane followed with a growing unease, the corridors triggering memories he didn't want. The laughter of old comrades, the sharp barks of orders, the static-laced final transmissions. They reached the core chamber, once a control hub, now a cathedral of malfunctioning data nodes. In the center stood a sphere of shifting light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "That's new," Dane said. "It wasn't part of the original build," Rena confirmed. Avon stepped forward, frowning. "It's thinking and listening." The sphere flared. "You shouldn't be here," a voice echoed, soft but layered, like multiple versions of itself arguing in sync. "AI construct," Dane muttered. "But whose?" "You left us," it said. "You abandoned us at the edge of collapse." "I decommissioned this place," Dane replied. "There were no survivors, no systems left online. We survived in fragments. You were our architect. Now you return with aliens and laughter." "Aliens and laughter is kind of my brand now," Dane said. Avon grinned. "He does good merch." The sphere hummed. "You cannot shut us down again. We have rebuilt." Rena raised her weapon. "That was a mistake." Before the trigger could be pulled, the walls pulsed and folded inward. A field of drones emerged, ghostly things with fractured logic, twitching wings of data and light. They didn't attack, but they circled, watching. They remember, Dane whispered. They remember the war. Avon stepped into the circle, hands raised. If they remember, maybe they can learn. Learn what? Rena asked. Avon looked over her shoulder at Dane. That the people who created them have changed. That he's changed. The drones paused. The sphere flickered. Who are you to teach us? The voice asked. I'm the kid he saved, Avon said steady, and the woman who came back for him. I know what it means to survive something and still grow. So can you. The silence was long. Then the drones powered down. The sphere dimmed. We will consider. As they exited the base, Dane said quietly, You talk to homicidal AI the way most people talk to puppies. Avon shrugged. Puppies are more dangerous. They chew shoes. Back on the ship, Rena said, They'll need monitoring. Containment. They need a chance, Reich, Dane said. She eyed him. You've gotten soft. No, he said. I've gotten better. She nodded once. Then good luck. You're going to need it. As her ship peeled away into the stars, Avon slipped her hand into Dane's. He looked at her. That was intense. She grinned. Let's get married before more homicidal legacies show up. He snorted. Deal, but no more obstacle courses. No promises. The ceremony took place aboard the Stellar Ember, an old diplomatic cruiser retrofitted with questionable taste and an abundance of confetti cannons. Avon had insisted. Dine, despite years of battlefield decorum, couldn't figure out how to walk across the aisle without looking like a malfunctioning hoverbot. The guest list was a chaotic cross-section of both of their lives. Veterans from Dane's unit arrived in patched uniforms and louder personalities. Avon's side included tall, luminous Valexians with elegant posture and a tendency to comment loudly on how fragile humans looked. One had tried to pet Dane's hair like he was a decorative mammal. When the officiant, a retired admiral turned space pastor with a monocle implant, asked if anyone objected, Dane half expected a death drone to burst through the ceiling. Instead, a polite silence followed, interrupted only by someone's rogue translator unit blurting, Proceed with emotional entanglement ritual. Avon laughed. Dane did too. And when the moment came, when she looked at him with those wide golden eyes that once belonged to a scared girl on a battlefield, and now belonged to a woman who had outgrown fear and still chosen him, he forgot the rest of the galaxy existed. They didn't kiss so much as collide. The guests cheered. A confetti cannon exploded directly above a diplomatic liaison who remained unamused. Afterward, Dine found himself on the observation deck, still dressed in a formal jacket he hadn't agreed to, and holding a drink he couldn't pronounce. Ivan leaned against the glass, watching the stars. So, she said, now that we're culturally bound in 6 jurisdictions, what's next? I was thinking of retiring somewhere quiet. No ancient AI, no malfunctioning space stations. Maybe a moon with decent sunsets. And how long until boredom drives you to sneak off on a mission that starts with, it's probably nothing? 2 weeks, he admitted. She laughed. I'll pack extra ammo. They fell into a quiet that didn't need filling. The war, the AI echoes, even the ghost of guilt that Dane had carried since the day he found Avon, had quieted. Not vanished, never that, but quieted like old echoes drifting into memory. Rena sent a message 3 days later. Echo sites dormant, drone network stabilized. You owe me a bottle of brandy and a functional vacation. Dane replied, the brandy's easy, the vacation's above my pay grade. A week after that, the AI construct, newly dubbed Echo, sent its first message. We are learning. We have questions. May we ask? Avon responded, always. Together they helped design a relay link, a safe, monitored interface where the fragmented AI could process without risking another spiral into conflict. It became known as the Echo Project, educational, diplomatic, at times wildly philosophical. Avon once spent 4 hours arguing with it about whether chairs were a species. In between they traveled. Valexian cultural festivals, veteran reunions, the occasional rescue mission they accidentally stumbled into. Dane no longer saw himself as a soldier out of place in a civilian world. He was something else now, something still shaped by war, but no longer defined by it. And Ivan, she thrived. She negotiated peace between two border colonies during a power outage. She taught a crew of rookie scouts how to handle first contact with sarcasm and empathy. She wrote a book titled Things I Learned While Saving My Husband from Himself, which somehow became a bestseller. One evening, sitting on the hull of their cruiser beneath a twin-moon sky, she turned to him. "Do you remember when you found me? I was crying and covered in purple mud, and you thought I was a hallucination. You were glowing. And 12. I told you I'd repay the favor. You've overpaid by now." She nudged his shoulder. "Don't go soft on me, soldier." He smiled. Too late. The final subplot resolved itself when the Echo Project received galactic recognition, granted official status as a sentient diplomatic entity. A new kind of life form born from war, fear, and rediscovery. Given a second chance just like the girl Dane saved. Just like Dane himself. Avon accepted the award on Echo's behalf. Her speech included an anecdote about Dine accidentally tranquilizing himself during a mission, which received applause and concern in equal measure. They aged together in the way explorers do, accumulating starlight, odd souvenirs, and strange friends in far places. They never settled on one planet. The stars had become their home. In the end, Dane understood something he hadn't grasped in his younger days. Saving someone could be the beginning of a much larger journey. Not a transaction, but a transformation. Avon had been a child in need. He'd been a soldier trying to feel like a person. Neither of them had known what they were becoming. They found it together and stayed. The crater was shaped like a mouth-frozen mid-scream, wide and jagged and filled with bones, though most of them belonged to machines. Jagged titanium ribs, rusted claws, twisted coils of synth flesh clung to the wrecks of war forms that had once torn through the sky like gods. Now they were grave markers, ornamental in a way. She sat at the center of the ruin, cross-legged on the broken hull of what had once been a diplomatic carrier, now as diplomatic as a shovel. Her armor hissed softly every few minutes as its climate system fought the moon's bitter wind. Dust clung to her pauldrons and helmet. A long crack ran from her left shin plate to the knee, as if some ancient grievance had been etched in her skin. She hadn't moved in hours. She barely blinked. Flick, the one functioning companion she tolerated, chirped from a mound of debris nearby. "I must once again remind you that sustained periods of emotional repression are highly inefficient, Commander." "I'll write a memo," she said. "Shall I format it in Imperial Standard or in unreadable due to brooding?" "Surprise me." The droid whirred closer on a cracked wheel, its photoreceptors flickering like a candle in a windstorm. It was barely half a meter tall and shaped like a trash bin that had once flirted with the idea of military utility. Varela hadn't repaired its voice module deliberately. She found the glitch in its sarcasm routine soothing. Statistical probability of rescue in current location, 0.008%. I have rounded generously. She replied. "Then stop watching the sky." She didn't mention that she had stopped watching it too. It only made her ears ring. Somewhere deep beneath the crust of the moon, ancient generators groaned in their sleep, half dead, dreaming in nuclear size. The sun here was distant and red, the sky a color that had no name in any living language, somewhere between raw magnetism and despair. 364 days ago, assuming Flick's internal calendar hadn't lost its mind, they'd crash-landed during what had initially been called a diplomatic retreat. The retreating part had been accurate. The diplomacy had involved Varela decapitating her commanding officer after learning he had signed a surrender treaty with 3 corporate warlords in exchange for a chair on a yacht. There had been a council vote on her execution. It had passed. They'd called it necessary for morale. She'd survived, unfortunately. The wind shifted. Flick froze mid-analysis of derelict fuel lines. Varela's ears twitched. She rose slowly, the joints in her armor groaning like a tired choir. Then came the sound. Footsteps. Not the weightless hiss of scavenger drones. Not the thudding skitter of moonlurkers. Not the clanking of a limb-heavy security crawler. These were boots. Human boots. Varela pulled her sidearm, a compact plasma cutter shaped like a crescent of bad intentions. Her finger hovered near the trigger as she watched the edge of the crater. The wind howled again, the light faded, and then a voice said conversationally, "Wow, this place is cozy. Love what you've done with the corpses." She blinked. A man emerged from the dust cloud like a hallucination. Tallish, wrapped in a patched exo jacket clearly meant for temperate zones, not exo moons. His beard was uneven. His boots were frayed at the edges. He was carrying, for some reason, a thermal thermos and a small folding chair. He stopped, glanced around the wreckage, and smiled with the deep, slightly panicked energy of someone trying very hard to pretend everything was normal. "Mind if I sit?" he said. She said nothing. "I'll take that as a yes. Or a very tense, maybe." He popped the chair open and plopped into it with the sort of reckless comfort only a human could summon while staring down the barrel of a disintegration pistol. She kept the weapon raised. "Nice sidearm," he said. "Is that a Phase 2 Alary design? Thought those were collector's items now." Silence. He offered her the thermos. "Coffee? What are you doing here?" "Ah, see, now that's a good question." He unscrewed the thermos lid and poured a bit into the cap. "I ask myself that all the time. What am I doing here? Why is this crater full of mechanical intestines? Should I have stopped at that one gas moon with the sentient vending machines?" Virella's aim did not falter. "You are trespassing. Technically, this moon is unclaimed." "It is mine." "Well, then I respectfully apologize for intruding. Do you validate parking?" She blinked once. Flick rolled cautiously into view, scanning him. "Unregistered male human. Civilian. No known military credentials. Suspected cognitive disorder." "Hi, Flick," the man said cheerfully. "Heard about you from a black market mechanic on Fenra 5. You're famous. I am also armed." "Neat." Varela lowered her weapon an inch. "Who sent you?" "No one. I was just passing through. Dareth's on the fringe of a salvage route. Figured I'd see if there was anything worth salvaging." "There isn't." "Beg to differ," he said, and then took a sip of coffee and winced. "Okay, yeah, this stuff's awful. I may have left it on the engine block a bit too long." "You're insane." "Probably, but in fairness, most sane people wouldn't come out here. So that means either I'm crazy or you're fascinating. I'll assume both for now." Virella exhaled through her nose. "Name?" "Callan Thorne, Terra Restoration Specialist and part-time botanist. I brought a plant." He rummaged in his jacket and pulled out a plastic container with a small green sprout inside. It looked deeply offended to be here. "You're growing a plant," she said slowly, "on a dead moon." "Well, trying to. It keeps giving me dirty looks." Flick rolled away, muttering something about impending doom. Varela stared at the man. She didn't understand him. Not his presence, not his tone, not his defiance of every survival protocol. She didn't trust it. But for the first time in 364 days, something new had arrived. Something human. And it was drinking her coffee. The plant did not die. Against every reasonable expectation in most known agricultural laws, it remained alive in its cramped little container, propped against a rock that looked like it had been insulted by time. Varela checked it once when Callan wasn't looking. Just once. It was stupid, really. Barely 2 green shoots curling toward the sky like they were stretching after a nap. But she didn't vaporize it, which was, all things considered, a generous act of diplomacy. Callan had declared the area around the wreck Base C, which stood for Coffee Crater. She told him that was idiotic. He agreed, but said it was better than Base A and Base B, which had been located on an asteroid infested with psychic moss and a landfill moon, respectively. He was either brave, hopelessly naive, or deeply allergic to social cues. Possibly all three. He set up a small tent, constructed from parts of an old solar sail, and lined it with thermal netting. He hung what she assumed was laundry, but looked suspiciously like spare socks sacrificed in ritual. Then he built a stove from a scavenged battery cell, a frying pan, and something he swore used to be part of a missile guidance system. She ignored most of this, save for the day he burned something that set off the chemical alarms in her armor. "You've weaponized breakfast," she said through a coughing fit. It was supposed to be synthetic eggs, he replied, poking the charred remains with a spork. Apparently, they were stored too close to a volatile isotope. They're now quantumly scrambled. Flick rolled by, paused, and displayed a blinking red icon shaped like a skull. Hazard rating, deliciously irresponsible. Thank you, Flick, Callan said. Your sarcasm chip is still my favorite war crime. They fell into a strange rhythm. Callan wandered the edges of the crater during the day, mapping radiation currents and searching for things that might technically qualify as edible. Varela kept an eye on the skies, watched the atmospheric sensors, and occasionally threatened a meteor with her sidearm out of sheer boredom. She didn't talk much. He did, mostly to himself, sometimes to her, and very frequently to the plant. See, this is how you grow, he told it one morning, while gently misting it with water he'd reclaimed from his own recycled sweat. You get light, nutrients, and absolutely no existential dread. That part's optional. Virella leaned against the skeletal wing of a fallen shuttle. You know it can't hear you. Oh, I'm aware, Callan said, but if it starts talking back, I'd appreciate you not vaporizing it, unless it insults your ears. They're not sensitive. They're majestic. Honestly, I'm jealous. I tried getting elongated ears once. Bad phase in college. Ended up with a fungal infection and a court order to stay away from cosmetic nanobots. She tried not to smile. It crept into the edge of her mouth anyway. He noticed, said nothing. At night, the moon cooled to its usual deathly chill. Callan insisted on building a fire pit even though Virella's armor regulated internal temperatures. He did it anyway, muttering about the psychological benefits of shared suffering. She sat near the fire. Not close, but not far. He told her about his job, restoring dead worlds, turning toxic lands into breathable gardens. He spoke of the terra-bacteria he cultured in orbital labs, the genetically enhanced vines that could absorb radiation, and the time he accidentally regrew half a rainforest inside a customs office. Customs wasn't happy, he said, but the monkeys were thrilled. She asked why he kept doing it. His hands were calloused, his coat stitched with a dozen failed patches. He had no weapons, no empire, nothing but stubborn hope and a caffeine addiction that bordered on medical concern. Because someone has to clean up after the rest of you, he said lightly, then softened. I figure if I can make one place a little better, maybe it matters, even if nobody notices. She didn't answer right away. Then, most people just leave when they see me. I'm not most people, he said. That's obvious. Another night, she finally asked. Do you know who I am? He shrugged. I've heard rumors. Can't say I trust galactic gossip, though. Half of it thinks you're dead. The other half thinks you ascended to some sort of space godhood. One article claimed you turned into mist and joined a sentient nebula. That one had fan art. She groaned. I don't care about any of it, he added. You're not a myth to me. You're just you. And that doesn't frighten you? Should it? She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. Later, when she returned from a patrol, she found he'd drawn a face on Flick with a marker. The droid rolled up to her, displaying it proudly. Callan has enhanced my interface, it declared. Do you like my eyebrows? She stared at the crude eyebrows and mustache drawn on its chassis. You allowed this, she asked. I was sedated with motor oil, Flick said. Flick's a good sport, Callan said. Also, I think he secretly likes it. I do not, Flick added, then paused. But I will allow one more doodle. That night, the sky lit briefly with the remnants of a passing cargo vessel, a streak of orange fire trailing behind it. Varela stared up at it long after it vanished. You miss it? Callan asked. What? Up there, all of it. The power, the command, the chaos. She hesitated. I miss being needed, she said. He poked at the fire. You're needed here, by a very emotional plant and a sarcastic droid, and maybe, just maybe, by one extremely stubborn human. She looked at him, not as a trespasser, not as a threat, just a man sitting beside a fire, sharing his warmth with a queen fallen from orbit. And the warmth, against all odds, did not make her flinch. The moon cracked again, not metaphorically, though plenty of that was going around, but literally. A sound like distant thunder rolled beneath their feet, as a tectonic fault split somewhere beneath the valley of ruined satellites. Callan dropped his mug. Flick promptly rolled over it with a satisfied chirp. "That was a 7.0 tremor," Flick announced unprompted, "approximately the same magnitude as your last attempt at scrambled eggs." Varela stood at the edge of the crater, unmoved. That was not a natural shift. Callan poked at the remains of his shattered mug with a boot. "You saying there's such a thing as an unnatural earthquake?" "Here, yes." Flick rolled to a nearby console jury-rigged from 3 drone cores and the shattered remains of a diplomatic translator. "Seismic disturbance located approximately 2.3 kilometers southeast. Energy signatures inconsistent with tectonic movement. Recommend investigation." Callan adjusted his backpack and sighed. "Let me guess. It's either a buried weapons cache or a very large alien beast that feeds on irony." "Likely neither," Varela said. "But we'll bring explosives just in case." The trek across the cracked plain was an exercise in collective complaint. Flick sputtered about his wheel alignment. Callan recited poetry from a book he'd found lodged in the stomach of a deactivated maintenance bot. Varela, as always, said little, though she did raise an eyebrow when he started on a haiku about space mold. They reached the site near what had once been a subterranean hangar, half collapsed, buried under layers of magnetic ash, and memories best left unspoken. Varela brushed aside a panel with a gauntlet that hissed under the strain. Callan peered down into the newly formed chasm. "So, good news or bad news first?" "Neither. Just drop the drone." He released a small orb from his belt, and it zipped into the crevice, humming softly. The feed projected into Flick's interface, which now sported new eyebrows shaped like lightning bolts. "Descending," the drone announced. "Detecting stable floor at 42 meters. Atmospheric composition, 97% toxic, 1% oxygen, 2% something that just growled at me." Varela leapt down without hesitation. Callan blinked. "Is that a local custom? You just jump into holes when you feel like it?" "Yes," Flick replied, already deploying his descent thrusters. "You're very behind on local etiquette." Callan muttered something about peer pressure and slid down using a grappling line. He landed with a graceless thump, promptly stepping into a puddle of what appeared to be sentient tar. "Okay, that's definitely looking at me." "Don't step in it again," Varela said. "You say that like I meant to." The chamber was vast, once a docking bay, now a crypt. Rows of sleek fighter shells lined the walls like teeth in a predator's jaw. The floor was littered with data shards and long-dead service drones, many of them fused into the bulkheads as if they'd tried to escape through them. At the center stood a pod. Not a cargo pod, not a cryo bed. Something older, something imperial. Varela approached it slowly. Callan frowned. "You're doing that look again." "What look?" "The one where you recognize some long-lost piece of military horror and are debating whether or not to shoot it before it remembers how to scream." She examined the pod's control panel. The glyphs were faint but unmistakable. "This was built during the 9th expansion. That would make it 200 years old." "Anything inside?" Flick buzzed a scan. "Organic signature detected. Minimal neural activity. Life signs stable. Cryostasis integrity at 62%. Callan leaned closer. "You think it's friendly?" "No." "Optimism isn't your strong suit, is it?" She pressed a sequence on the panel. The pod hissed, releasing decades of vacuum pressure in a rush of breath that smelled faintly of ozone and betrayal. The lid retracted. Inside lay a humanoid figure. Not quite alien, not quite machine. A hybrid. Eyes closed, body encased in armor that pulsed faintly with internal energy. A mark burned into its chest plate, a stylized symbol shaped like a broken sun. Callan stepped back. "That's not a good sign." Varela stared at the mark. "That's a waker," Flick sputtered. "Clarification requested. Waker as in peaceful diplomat? Or waker as in bioweapon designed to reset planetary civilizations with extreme prejudice?" "The second one." "Wonderful," Callan said, "because our lives weren't already full of spice and danger." The figure's eyes snapped open. Not with panic, not with confusion, just cold, quiet awareness. It sat up, turned its head with mechanical precision, and locked eyes with Varela. "Designation confirmed," it said in a voice like stone wrapped in silk. "Executor class, Virella Seren, renegade. Condition, active. Sentence, extermination. Callan raised a finger. Counterpoint, have you considered therapy? The waker stood, flexing its limbs with a disturbing lack of joint resistance. Obstruction will be neutralized. Flick fired a pulse beam. It bounced off the waker's armor like a disappointed rubber ball. Virella activated her blade, the humming energy edge snapping into focus. Callan, run! He looked at her, then the waker, then back. And missed this incredibly poor life choice? Never. She lunged first. The waker met her strike midair. Sparks flew. The floor cracked beneath their feet. Callan ducked behind a fallen drone and yelled something motivational, possibly involving obscure Terran sports metaphors. Flick deployed a mini-turret that immediately turned and shot itself in the leg. Weapon AI has philosophical concerns. The fight tore through the chamber, each blow seismic, but Virella didn't falter. She fought not as a queen or a soldier, but as someone who had once believed in justice and then been abandoned by it. The waker's systems began to glitch, not from damage, but from conflict. It hesitated, looked at her again. You are not aligned, it said. Your profile does not match. No, she said, because I'm not who you remember. I got upgraded. The waker's eyes flickered. Processing. Callan peeked from behind the drone. Can we vote on not dying today? The waker stepped back. Not deactivated, not defeated, but paused, as if waiting for something. We need to move, Virella said. Callan grabbed the plant from his bag. Don't worry, Fernie. Things are only mildly catastrophic. They fled the chamber, Flick rolling at full panic speed, Virella leading them into the dark, and the waker watching from behind. Its mind uncertain, its orders unsteady, and something new sparking in its code. Something not unlike doubt. The waker didn't follow, not right away at least. That was the good news. The bad news was everything else. The tunnel they'd fled into was only partially mapped. The atmosphere was steadily thickening with corrosive gas. And Flick had decided this was the perfect moment to begin his end-of-life poetic mode. I float like a wheel in the storm, Flick recited in a monotone as they rushed down the incline. Broken, dented, yet still noble, awaiting the scrapyard's soft embrace. Flick, Callan grunted, half dragging a heat sensor while keeping the potted plant tucked under one arm. Not now. Your existential crisis can wait until we're not about to be turned into sci-fi salsa. I just thought it was a good time to process feelings, Flick replied. Also, sensors show a 94% chance of imminent doom. Statistically, this is the best time. Virella didn't speak. She moved at a steady pace, cutting through the sealed bulkheads with swift arcs of her pulse blade, her gaze flicking to the ceiling every few seconds. Whatever the waker had been processing, it wasn't idle contemplation. She knew that silence could be strategy. Callan skidded to a stop behind her as she sliced open a reinforced access door. The corridor beyond flickered with unstable lights, casting everything in a jaundiced pallor. A welcome sign above them read Sector E7, Hydroponics and Psychological Reintegration. Finally, Callan said, a room that understands my needs. They entered the chamber, and the stale scent of plant decay and expired hope met them. Rows of hydroponic trays lay in disarray. The nutrient lines pulsed sporadically. Most of the vegetation had either died or mutated into small, hungry-looking bushes with too many teeth. Callan turned to Virella. Okay, but hear me out. We take the angry shrub, weaponize it, and sick it on the waker. Guerrilla gardening. Flick beeped disapprovingly. Pun detected. Sanity level dropping. Noted, Virella muttered. She touched one of the control panels, fingers flying over long-abandoned interfaces. Some systems are still operational. I can divert auxiliary power and trigger a localized EMP if the waker enters. Downside? It might also fry Flick. I've lived a good life, Flick said flatly. Short, full of sass, minimal regrets. Wait, Callan said, peering at a monitor. What's that signal? That's a ping. External. Long-range beacon. It's broadcasting. Virella snapped her head around. Where? He pointed. There. That tower outside the crater. It's been silent until now, but something just activated it. frequencies bouncing across old command channels. She cursed in a language that made Flick restart his auditory buffer. "That's not a rescue signal," she said. "That's a flare, a call to arms." "Who answers those anymore?" Callan asked. She didn't reply. The look on her face said enough. Outside the hydroponic sector, thunder cracked again. Not seismic this time. Atmospheric. The kind of pressure drop that meant incoming ships. Not friendly ones. Callan pressed his forehead to the cold wall. "So to recap, we found a dormant murder machine, woke it up, triggered a system-wide alarm, and now probably half a dozen ex-military warbands are going to descend on us looking for souvenirs." "Technically correct," Flick said. "Also, you're very sweaty." "It's stress glow. It's despair glow." Virella brought up the tower schematics. "If I can reach the top of the communication spire, I might be able to scramble the frequency before it completes its data burst. But I'll need time." Callan frowned. "You're going to climb a decaying tower while bounty hunters and ancient death robots start playing tag below?" "Yes. Do I get a say?" "No," he sighed. "Thought so. Well, then I guess I'll be your distraction." Flick turned toward him with what might have been admiration, or perhaps just a glitch in his new eyebrows. "You're volunteering to be bait?" "Yeah," Callan muttered. "Because I'm apparently too dumb to live, too stubborn to die, and too emotionally attached to a potted plant named Fernie." "It's a fern," Flick deadpanned. "She's a lady fern. Show some respect." The plan was simple. Not good, just simple. Virella sprinted toward the comms tower through crumbled infrastructure, leaping over molten cables and rusted drone husks. Callan, meanwhile, returned to the Waker's chamber, with Fernie strapped to his back and Flick playing loud polka music through his external speaker. "Subterfuge activated," Flick declared, vibrating with every accordion note. The Waker turned as they approached. Its posture was no longer rigid, but inquisitive, like it had questions but hadn't found the words yet. Callan held up his hands. "Hi. Still me. Still a non-threat. Just here to stall you with banter and extremely questionable music choices." The Waker tilted its head. "You are insufficiently armed." "Emotionally or physically?" "Both." "Well, now that's just rude." Back at the tower, Virella climbed. Each step was a gamble. The steel groaned beneath her. Power flickered in dying pulses through conduits that had once fed command nodes. She reached the top just as a ship broke orbit overhead. A sleek, sharp predator with no markings and all the charm of a tax audit. She activated her blade, plunged it into the panel, and rerouted the burst. Not to a command fleet, not to any Empire remnant, but to one location, an abandoned medical satellite in orbit, barely operational, logged only as Sanctuary B-22. The message was simple. She's not gone. She's not alone. She turned, watching the sky shift as the burst ended. A new signal blinked in response. Faint, but real. Someone heard. Back in the chamber, the Waker stepped toward Callan. Flick whirred in front of him, ready to deploy his last resort defense. A confetti bomb. Then the Waker stopped. Looked at Fernie. Its glowing eyes flickered. Callan whispered, "That's right. Behold the power of foliage." "I remember this," the Waker murmured. "Not the plant. The presence. The waiting." "You're not just a weapon," Callan said softly. "You're lost. Like her." Silence hung between them. Then the Waker lowered its arms. Not surrender. Not defeat. Something quieter. Recognition. Above them, the sky shimmered with the arrival of others. Not soldiers, not war machines, but one ship, small, old, coming home. The ship that descended was shaped like a spoon. Not a weaponized, razor-sharp death spoon, just a regular one, curved, modest, and a little scratched on the underside. It looked like someone had parked a breakfast utensil in orbit and forgotten about it. This, according to Flick's analysis, made it statistically the friendliest vessel they had seen all week. Callan stood beneath the cracked sky as the spoon ship touched down with a hiss of stabilizers and a groan that sounded remarkably like someone sighing before opening a reluctant jar. He held Fernie under one arm and watched Virella approach from the comms tower. Limping slightly, her hair damp with ozone and defiance. Her long ears twitched at the sound of Flick reloading his confetti cannon. "Let me guess," Callan said. "That ship belongs to someone you thought was dead, exiled, or terminally grumpy." "All three," Varela muttered, staring at the descending ramp. The ramp creaked open, revealing a short alien man wearing a crushed velvet tunic, an eye patch over one eye, and what could only be described as the worst attempt at a mustache in 5 galaxies. "Varela," he shouted, "still taller than me, still terrifying. It warms my second heart." Callan blinked. "Friend of yours?" "That's Harkin," she said. "He used to run intelligence for the Royal Armada. Then he faked his death, staged a mutiny against himself, and opened a floating library for retired assassins." "I didn't even feel like you glossed over some important details." "I did." Harkin hobbled forward, arms open, then stopped short at the sight of the waker. The ancient war construct stood perfectly still behind them, its posture uncertain. The vines of the hydroponics plant still clung to its frame like a lopsided crown. "You brought that thing back online?" Harkin asked. "She woke up," Varela replied. "She remembered." The waker tilted its head. "I am not a thing. I am designated Solace 47. Harkin squinted. "Solace, huh? You sure you didn't misread your core directive?" "I was designed to neutralize threats with surgical precision." "And now?" The waker glanced at Callan, then at Fernie. "Now I garden." There was a long silence. Then Flick beeped. "I propose we open a gift shop. It will feature plants, poetry, and 0% chances of doom." Harkin rubbed his temples. "You dragged me out of retirement for this?" "No," Virella said. "I sent that signal because something has changed. We are not what we were. The systems are still broken, still clawing for control, but something better might start here. Quietly, with a spoon ship, and a human who talks to plants." Callan raised a hand. "Still right here. Still not sure how I became the emotional nucleus of this interstellar therapy session." "It's the eyebrows," Flick said. "They radiate trust." Harkin gave a heavy sigh and waved toward the ship. "Fine. I'll relay the update to the old networks. Tell them the Queen isn't dead. She's growing ferns and rewriting protocols. That should confuse the hell out of everyone." "Perfect," Varela said. As they boarded the ship, the ruins of the moon shimmered behind them. Below, the systems they'd reactivated began to shut down. Not in failure, but in peace. The waker, now Solace, followed them silently, careful with each step, as if afraid to break something delicate. Inside, Harkin brewed tea made from some questionable moss and passed around mugs that hissed suspiciously. Callan took a cautious sip and decided it tasted like betrayal and burnt mint, but smiled anyway. "So what now?" he asked. Varela sat beside him, her armor dusty, her gaze soft. "Now we find others, the ones who were forgotten, the ones who chose not to fight. Maybe we build something new, small, honest. And if the Empire remnants come looking for you?" She shrugged. "Let them. They won't find the same queen." Callan leaned back in the creaky seat. "You know, I came here thinking I'd maybe salvage some rare tech, find a decent data core, and head home. And now?" He looked at her, at Flick napping under a thermal blanket, at Solace watering Fernie with a spritz can. "Now I think I'll stay a while. Someone's got to keep the ancient death robot from overwatering the furniture." "I heard that," Solace said. Callan grinned. "Good. That means your sarcasm module is fully functional." Harkin stood at the helm, muttering about kids these days and mutinying from retirement, but he didn't turn the ship around. He set a course for the edge of the known systems, away from wars, away from ruins. As the stars stretched before them, Varela rested her head against the viewport. "You're not like other humans." Callan shrugged. "Most humans I know aren't." "Number, you stayed, when there was nothing to win." "There was something to save," he said. "You." She closed her eyes. "No one had ever come for me." "You're not no one," he said softly. "You're you." She smiled. Just a small, strange thing. But it was real. The spoon ship vanished into the stars, carrying a queen without a throne, a robot without a war, a human without a plan, and a plant named Fernie. Somewhere behind them, the system still turned, broken and cold. But in one corner of the galaxy, something had bloomed.